So a couple of months ago, there was this trend that popped up on social media that was like, I'm hosting a cafe in my home or like opening up a coffee shop in my house. And I was like, that's so cool. I want to do that. So for a couple of weeks, I spent practicing my coffee making skills, which is actually pretty funny because I don't really drink that much coffee. So that was a good new thing for me to learn, and kind of also testing some baking recipe, which I'm a little bit better at, but still I haven't baked for like 15 people ever. So I was like, let's try a bunch of new recipes. And then weeks went by and I had like mentioned the idea to a couple of friends until one of them was like, I'll help you, but we have to do it that day because it's been like 2 months that I was talking about it. So she kind of set a deadline for me. And so we talked about our menu, who we would invite actually, because obviously I live in a like fairly small apartment. So it's not like I can just open up my home to 100 people. It was coming along very nicely and I was getting excited about hosting. Obviously, if this is the first video that you watch of me, you might not know that, but otherwise, this is most of what my channel is about. I work as a software engineer during the day. And so I was like, as a tech person, I can't help, but I have to code something for this. I think it's a fairly common professional tick that almost any software engineer have. It's like, even if we make something like completely analog and that is not related to coding, we have to make something slightly technical for it. And so I decided that to live up to any other good like hipster cafe place, we needed a good website, which actually works out perfectly because I also used to do graphic design as like a freelance gig when I was younger. And it's been a while that I haven't had the opportunity to kind of like mix both skills because my work is more like back-end data engineering stuff, so not really front-end related. And I was like, that's be fun. So I sort of started with 2 steps. One step was just the like design part, just looking at some inspiration coffee places I like to go to and taking inspiration from their aesthetic. I even made a little logo for our cafe and a little name because I thought that would be funny. And what if we decide to host it again? Then we had like a proper branding going on. And on the tech part, I obviously wanted something a little extra on the website and not just for it to be like a static website. And so I decided, since I was going to bake only limited quantities of most of what I was baking, because I wasn't really sure of how many people would show up because I invited a bunch of people, but then we said we're open from a certain time to a different time and people were kind of expected to show up whenever they wanted. So I wasn't sure how much I should bake, also because I didn't want to be left over with like 20 of everything because I was going on vacation the next week. So I decided that a useful feature and something that would create sort of like a feeling of urgency for people to come show up would be to have the like live stock of how much is left of everything on the menu, so that's like when they're on their work they can already start to be like, oh, maybe I'll get that, or maybe this is like out of stock and they have to pick something else, or they want to come in early if something is only in a low quantity. Obviously that's not like a super complicated feature. The only limit I had was that since we're supposed to update live as we were doing the cafe and like selling some of the pastry that we made, I had to update this live, but so did my co-host, who's not like a software engineer. So obviously we needed to have an interface to do that and have this sort of like back end that would be linked to like a proper interface to like remove quantities or add them, which kind of ruled out the initial idea that I had of like having just a SQL database ready and just doing queries on that to update it, because obviously I wasn't gonna make my non-software engineer friends run queries. Also, the likeliness of like accidentally erasing something would be very high. And I know what you're thinking. This is not a very complicated project. Obviously, I've built probably hundreds of projects like this before. The only issue is that the cafe was opening in 2 days and I still had a lot of baking to do, a lot of cleaning to do, and like setting everything up. So I really was on time crunch for the website part. And I was starting to feel maybe a little overwhelmed by the complication. Something that was initially just like a fun idea for me to do like a bit of my like tech knowledge during this cafe turned into like a bit more of a heavy project than I was wanting to do or willing to do. And that's when I realized this is something very common as software engineer that we do, is we tend to overcomplicate things. Why was I gonna need for just like something that I was gonna host at home for like 3 hours that I'd have to create a database for, create an interface for the back-end part, a front-end part, link everything together, make sure it's up to date? That sounded way too complicated. So I actually took a step back from that idea and I was like, I still want to do that, but what is the like simplest way to do that? And that's when an idea came to mind. Excel, which I know is a very scary word for us software engineers. None of us like Excel. It's like both super complicated, but also very limiting as a tool. But sometimes you have to admit that's like a basic thing that a lot of companies still run on. And it's essentially a pre-built interface for a database that anyone can use. So how did I build it exactly? So I just did a normal basic front end. I actually used Flask for it because I mostly work with Python and that's just something that I'm more comfortable with. I think it could work with just JavaScript and HTML. And then I created for the database just a Google Sheet. And then basically because it's a Google product, you can just use an API key or make the Google Sheet like public and then just pull the data from the Google Sheets into your page. And then while the cafe was happening, we would just update the stocks on the Google Sheet to make sure that it stays up to date. I actually completed this whole project probably in under an hour because all I had to do was create the Google Sheet, copy the link for it, and then I used AI to build most of the front end. But because I had a specific aesthetic in mind, I just prompted it with precise tech specs, but also a design guide. So I gave it examples of style of design because I think AI is not very good at understanding images, so sometimes it doesn't work super well to give like screenshots of other websites, but to actually find the name of the style of those websites and then prompt AI to build your website in those styles works much better, I have found, than giving it images. And then I just connected everything, make sure it kept being synced, and then I just deployed everything on this thing called Python Anywhere. It's a like super easy, free if you have only one app to use, and especially because I was only going to use it for one day, I didn't need to like buy a domain or anything. And then everything was up and running, and I just sent a link to people, and I think it really was a nice added touch and gave the whole thing a really like polished impression, because obviously, I mean, those are my friends that are coming over. It's fine. It's not like I need to impress them. But I think it was a really nice touch to add to anything. The event was actually really fun. I will definitely do it again, even though it was a lot of work. And if I'm completely honest, the website wasn't actually that useful, which I completely expected. I fully did this because it was fun for me and it actually allowed me to discover something new. I think I've had never like connected directly a Google Sheet to a front end. So that was actually like pretty good use case and something that can be especially good to know for like small POC projects like that. And I think it served as a very good reminder for me that as tech people, we have a tendency to just overcomplicate things without sometimes really adding any value and just making something to maintain way too complex, and that they are simple tools that exist and we can just connect them, and that's enough for most use cases. And if this is something you really resonate with, I encourage you to click on the link below and sign up to join my newsletter, where I try to send tips for what I would call minimalist tech software engineers. And I hope this also inspired you to do any sort of like analog project or project with friend that you've been waiting on. And that doesn't mean you have to not add your little tech touch to it, but also, you know, just gather friends, do fun stuff, and try to get a little bit outside of your like usual comfort zone as a software engineer. I think creativity is something that is very important to maintain, and to maintain that creativity, obviously you need to experiment with it and try new things. And with that being said, I will see you in the next video next week.